This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight Judge Tom Engel. Welcome, Tom. And
thank you very much, Sam. It's nice to be here in Warner Robins and Macon area with you.
Great. Now, Tom, it's a delight to have you with us here tonight, and I think we can get some perspectives that are a little uncommon for this area. I mean, you're from the big city, New York City, is that correct? And
that's right, Sam. I've been practicing law in New York City since graduation from law school in the early 1970s, and then more recently I was elected just a judge to a judgeship upstate where we have a farm up in the Catskill Mountains.
Yes, and you know, one thing that's a little interesting is you ran for Congress recently. You had your name in the hat for that. And
well, that's right. I ran in 2011 and 12. This was just after the 2010 census.
Yes.
And at that time, there were 29 congressional districts in New York, and as a result of the census, New York lost 2 seats. Places
Yes.
like Georgia,
Yes,
for example,
yes.
and Texas and other places, mostly in the South, gained
Yes.
seats. So, and it turned out that one of the 2 seats that was lost in New York was the district in which I was running.
Yes.
And so I withdrew in favor of the sitting Republican candidate who inherited much of that territory, and I'm glad to say he was reelected.
Well, that's a good story, Tom. Now, maybe we can just chat tonight about some of the issues that you confront our nation and the American people, and your experiences as a lawyer and actually a person with some interest in the political dimensions of the country. I mean, what are some issues that are big in New York State, upper New York State these days? What are things that attract attention there?
Well, certainly the issue that more than any other animated my candidacy was the fracking issue, the natural gas that is part of the Marcellus Shale formation that stretches really from West Virginia and eastern Ohio through Pennsylvania and into a sizable portion of the
Yes.
what's called the southern tier of New York, which is where the boundary of New York and Pennsylvania flattens out towards central and western New York. And that's a dramatic story, Sam, the difference between the 2 states. And it is not unlike the difference between East Berlin and West Berlin during the Cold War.
Is Pennsylvania West Berlin and New York State East Berlin?
In this case, yes.
Yes.
In this case, it is. Because Pennsylvania, under the leadership of the then Democratic governor, Ed Rendell, working with the legislature, decided to permit natural gas fracking and did so beginning in about 2008. And the difference that has made in north central Pennsylvania, northeast Pennsylvania, has been staggering.
Yes.
Bradford County, for example, which borders New York State, was, I am told, the poorest county in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, only as recently as 2008, and now it is said to be the richest county in Pennsylvania. And that is purely a product of fracking. Now, maybe I should explain a little bit about what fracking is.
Please do. What exactly is that?
I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer.
Yes.
But beginning after the Second World War, the petroleum engineers figured out a way to release from shale formations all over the United States both natural gas and oil. And it's done by shooting water at high speed together with some chemicals and sand
Yes.
into these shale formations, breaking up the shale, which releases either natural gas or oil. And that process was successful, but then about, I want to say 8 or 10 years ago, through good old American know-how and ingenuity, these same engineers, or a different generation of them, figured out how to do that kind of hydraulic fracturing horizontally, not vertically. So instead of just putting one spot in the ground,
Yes.
they could go down like this and cover a much larger area with the same one
Yes.
drilling pipe that went in, so that it multiplied the amount of gas and oil that came out of the ground 100-fold, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
And made the process of fracking both productive and economically productive.
Well, now this is a huge deal for the United States of America, the fact this technology is there, and the country depends on this new technology to obtain energy independence. It changes the geopolitical structure of the world, yet some states are reluctant to employ the technology.
Well,
are there reasons for that, and what's wrong with the Empire State?
Well, you take many different states. North Dakota, for example, has full employment now.
Yes.
And its GDP as a state has doubled and tripled just in the last few years.
Yes.
Because of the oil fields that are called the Bakken
Right.
fields
Yes.
in central and western North Dakota near Williston.
Right.
But there's a different formation in and around Fort Worth, Texas, some in Arkansas and Louisiana. So they're all over the place.
Well, I regret, though, Tom, to say that the good Lord has not favored Georgia with this cornucopia of wealth, but we have to deal with it, I guess.
The good Lord has favored Georgia with so much, it
With
would
the
be
beautiful-
unfair to just give it also the
Well,
shale,
that's a
you know.
good point, Tom. We don't want to be too greedy here, do we?
But you asked about the Empire State, Sam, and
By the way, Tom, this is the Empire State of the South. We have two Empire States.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad there. The Empire State of the North, which was probably best denominated once the Empire State, because I'm not so sure it is anymore, because its ambitions
Yes.
have shrunk with I think a sort of a pusillanimous attitude towards growth and expansion.
Yes.
And this is brought to you largely, it seems to me, by Governor Cuomo, who has, when he took office, planned to be very bullish on economic development
Yes,
in the
yes.
state, and said that after a review of it, he favored fracking in the state.
Yes.
That has come, however, to absolutely nothing.
Yes.
Because of the power, so it seems to me, of the green lobby,
Right.
the environmental movement, which is concentrated with singular fire on the governor, and who has delayed the fracking for study of health, study of water quality, study of this, study of that, and he's essentially put it in the pantry. And that delay has now been augmented by the state assembly, which has passed a law that requires yet another 2 years of moratorium while they think about it.
Yes.
Meanwhile, of course, the geologists and the petroleum industry, the natural gas industry, has decided to move elsewhere. They've moved to Ohio.
Yes.
They've moved to West Virginia. We already know about North Dakota, but there are other areas.
Yes.
And it's these states that have begun to welcome this kind of development that are getting the play and getting the jobs and getting the growth and development
Well,
that could have been New York.
Yes. Now, as far as I know, no terrible tragedies have occurred in the Keystone State, the neighboring state of Pennsylvania. Nothing horrific
Right.
has happened, and just across this rather artificial boundary between the two states, one state seems to be taking advantage of its mineral wealth, and the other state is just not doing anything. And
That's exactly right. Yeah, the geology is no respecter of political boundaries, and,
Yes.
and the Marcellus Shale Formation spreads well
Yes,
into New
yes.
York. And indeed, New York has the bounty further of, in
Yes,
far western
yes.
New York, of something called the Utica Shale
yes,
Formation,
yes.
which may yet indeed be larger than the Marcellus
Yes,
Formation. And that too has begun to be taken advantage of by the state of Ohio.
Yes.
So it's sort of a double whammy for the
Yes,
people
yes.
of New York. And I might add that that upstate New York is essentially, in many ways, an Appalachian kind of
Yes.
area. The great cities of upstate New York, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, have all seen much better
Yes,
days,
yes, yes.
and the rural areas of upstate New York are likewise hurting in terms of population, tax base, industry, any number of things that makes the empire that once was built, really largely on the history of the Erie Canal and the transportation hub that created. That's really gone now, so that the people of upstate New York are hurting.
Yes.
And in my view, there's no need for that to have occurred.
Well, this is, we have a complicated country, don't we, Tom? I mean, just to make one kind of comment about the decisions that are made by governments or influenced by lots of, pressure groups that try and influence politicians the one direction or another, and often how shrill the pressure group is determines sort of what happens and their financial clout. And New York is just for our viewers, when people think of New York, they think of New York City, but as I think you correctly point out, that's just a small part of the state, and it's.
That's true. Geographically, New York, one thing that is perhaps not appreciated is New York is a very large state.
Yes.
It takes, 6 hours to drive from
Yes,
one
yes.
part of it to another in places. And whereas upstate New York was a paradigm of industry, education, inventiveness,
right.
growth, all through the 19th century, it is now moribund.
Yes.
And that needn't have happened. I think Governor Cuomo has
Yes.
unquestionably presidential ambitions. He'd like to keep the state from having any kind of controversy and try to maintain high popularity numbers at the cost of doing what he is sworn and was sworn to do, which is to make the best future for all of New York. And he has failed to do that, in my view.
Well, in New York, politics are pretty tough sometimes. There's lots of, it's such a complicated political process when we have the urban boroughs in New York City and then these very rural areas
Sure.
sort of clashing in Albany. Well, what's the political makeup now of the state legislature? And it's pretty much a Democratic state, is it not?
Well, historically, the state assembly, which is like the House of Representatives,
yes.
has been Democratic, and the state Senate has been Republican. That's been chipped away at
Yes.
In the most recent elections, so that now the governing majority in the state Senate is a combination of the Republicans and 5, I think,
Yes.
renegade Democratic senators
Yes.
who like the idea of having some independence from the assembly and want to help determine the road of New York from a conservative Democratic position, but they also are pushing the Republicans a little bit to the left. So New York is in a quandary, really, and the leadership that they need, much
Yes.
as the country needs
Yes.
leadership, hasn't been shown from the executive side, and indeed it hasn't been shown from the executive side for quite a while, going back through both Republican and Democratic governors.
Is there, and really, the title of New York State is the Empire State. Certainly, in the 19th century and for a lot of the 20th century, it was really the powerhouse for the whole country. You mentioned many of the moribund parts of the state. There are a lot of I guess, failure in many ways to go into the 21st century. Do you think in some ways the things that have stopped progress in New York might be nationwide? I mean, do we have a failure of our country to step up to the plate and make appropriate decisions? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that New York is singular in its historical support for high taxes, brought to you largely by New York City and by Wall Street and a traditional immigrant
Yes.
economy in New York. Now that's translated now so that California perhaps is the leader in that sort of high tax, low growth. Once the Golden State,
yes.
California is really no longer the Golden State, and they have now a net emigration
Yes.
out of California. So to some extent, I think New York and California are harbingers of what is coming for the rest of the country, unless the rest of the country follows the lead of sound growth policies such as you find in Georgia and Texas,
Yes.
for example, and these low tax environments where people are voting with their feet and going to
Yes.
live there. And you've raised the question of whether the country as a whole is going in that direction, and I have to say that the leadership that the president has shown on these issues is woeful.
Yes,
I
yes.
have to say that. His leadership, which could have really, particularly in January and in December, before the new Congress was sworn in, and even afterwards, this was a time when America really could have come together to cut back on the spending that we can't afford,
Yes.
and put that revenue that would otherwise go to spending to the productive use of the individuals and entrepreneurs and families and companies to make that an engine of growth. Fracking would be just one
Yes,
example of
yes.
that, but now that fracking is here, it foretells and portends, it seems to me, a growth of American energy and industry all around the country. In Houston, for example, is revivified at this point. The railroad industry is taking off again.
Yes.
Places that where America was shuttering factories in Louisiana, for one example, Ohio, for another example. These places are finding the energy costs are now so low in the United States that it trumps the lower labor costs
Yes,
elsewhere, and is creating a boom in manufacturing. Now that boom is incipient at this point. It hasn't taken off in the way that it will.
Yes.
But the president has done shockingly little to encourage that, and at the same time is sort of sitting in the catbird seat waiting to take credit for it.
Yes.
A signal example, of course, would be the Keystone Pipeline, which he has yielded to the Green Lobby in holding up so far. Although I hear the drumbeat that he may yet yield on that and permit it.
Yes, yes. We have a very complicated political process. We have a complicated country. There are lots of lots of different opinions and interests out there. Is there an argument? I mean, what is the Green Party's argument about just in general exploiting any kind of resource? I mean, is there evidence to think that it would in any way injure us acutely to got all this natural gas that's there? Or what's the argument on the other side of this?
Well, I mean, I think you put it well earlier. There has been no catastrophe on the Pennsylvania side of the border with New York, naturally, in any kind of major development like this, there is the odd spill. There is a truck that's gone off the road. There is some methane leakage, and I don't mean to demean the importance of those things. Obviously, safety first, but the kind of yelling and hollering about a major ecological disaster has not come along, and your viewers may well want to seek out a new movie that was made by a husband and wife team from Northern Ireland called Frack Nation, which was reviewed favorably even by the liberal New York Times as having done a very responsible investigation of the natural gas and fracking industry, and found that the allegations of disaster or of ecological catastrophe are not only overdone, but simply false.
We have to weigh, do we not, just the social benefits and social cost of any kind of a productive activity. I mean, it's sort of, to quote a poet of your knowledge, dare I eat a peach? That's sort of, I mean, you have to take some steps to at least do something in the world. And every action has at least some negative side to it.
That's right.
And we just have to balance the good and the bad there.
Risk is inherent in living as human beings and in venturing in large and small groups. I think what captured the environmental movement was a move away from what the great English philosopher Edmund Burke used to call the little platoons. And the little platoons were active and have been active in the UK and in the United States forever. And they were groups that would look after a park in the local town, or they would create a movement to clean up a waterway, or to remove billboards, or whatever it was to try to beautify their town or their county or something. But the little platoons betokened a small group of people that acted locally out of love of their home and the area around their home. And what the environmental movement has done instead has to appropriate, or if you will, misappropriate that instinct to take on national themes, and encountered great success, some of which is deserved in the Clean Air Act and the Clean Waters Act, but to take on something like climate change is, it seems to me, a bridge too far, and makes one's natural commitment to home and homeland, what the Germans call Heimatgefühl, and translate it into an international stage and global commitment, where you are dealing with places like China, India, and so forth, that will keep putting CO2 into the air at a rate that would make any effort that the United States made superfluous.
And so we have a lot of complexities in the world, don't we? For instance, the idea about climate change. Obviously, the climate has changed enormously during the Earth's history. We've you're from New York, and let's say 10,000 years ago, the ice was a mile thick over Central Park. We have lots of changes that have happened. The dinosaurs used to be at the North Pole. We have these events. There are many reasons that cause these changes, and the question comes up: is what are the humans doing to the planet to basically alter the I guess CO2 in the air? And there are lots of things that could be going on. So it's a multifactorial arrangement. And we don't know exactly what the human footprint is in these changes, but some of the power that's been aggregated by the government to control these changes really is a bridge too far, is it not, in many ways? The power over your personal life, the welfare of society, the economic underpinning. The government could just choke off progress.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the directions the environmental movement has taken us, you find all of these overarching national impulses and incentives and regulations, things that walk hand in hand really with larger federal government power in many other areas.
Yes.
Take universities, just as an odd example. The most public and large private universities in this country get a lot of federal aid.
Yes.
And that's principally for research. And these large universities and other areas, they bring research to us, which is really the key of progress in so many ways. Scientific research, medical research, your field,
right, yes.
And these things. But the government then says, well, we have an interest in that, but we also have an interest, for example, in making sure that undergraduates in college don't drink so much, particularly if they're underage. And so they tell these universities, well, if you don't abide by a nationwide drinking age of 21, even though that was historically a state-by-state issue, then we're going to cause your funding to be at risk. And so that federalizes, to some extent, universities by making sure, or trying to make sure, that these universities all march in as one to enforce a drinking age limit of 21 years old. Now, the federal government has no business doing that. And then when problems come along in college-age drinking, and people say, well, golly, if you have undergraduates who are not allowed to drink, then their drinking will become secretive.
Yes.
And because they don't really know how to drink, it'll become likely to become more binge drinking and things like that that is going to cause harm to people. And so instead of being able to sort of let Rhode Island try a 20-year-old limit, or the state of Oregon try something at 18, we're all stuck with this federal one-size-meets-all.
Yes.
And as a result, we have binge drinking as an epidemic throughout the United States.
Well, Tom, on that note, which I think is a useful one for many of the members of our audience about being restrained in these issues, it's been great having you here tonight, and we'll have another conversation quite soon. So thank you.
I look forward to it.
Yes, thank you a lot, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you for being my host.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.